So overall, Piaget was kind of foundational in laying out some of the different key developmental changes that occur, but his theory definitely had criticisms, as do most theories. No theory is perfect. So one of the criticisms that Piaget's theory has is that it fails to consider individual differences. He's putting all children in this box, that if they're in this age, they do these things. However, we know that cognitive development can be so variable. I mean, some adults never attain the ability to fully reason abstractly, for instance. So due to some of this variability, it's more realistic to think of cognitive development as being continuous and gradual as you progress through the stages rather than stage-like. It's not like, you're 6 years old, and then as soon as you go 6 years in one day, you just jump to the next stage, right? That doesn't seem logical. So it's maybe more of a gradual process as you start to obtain these different skills. So yeah, it fails to consider any sort of outside external influence. We talked about how Piaget was really focused on the individual, the child as a scientist, being able to intrinsically motivate themselves to explore the world, to not need help from other sources. But like we know that your family has a huge input in and effect on how you develop. Which we'll get into it more in a second. But overall, it seems to kind of just misrepresent abilities a little bit. It seems to underestimate the abilities of young children. They can do a little bit more than they're given credit for. And it overestimates the abilities of adolescents. We know that the human brain isn't fully mature until their 20s, right? Your prefrontal cortex isn't fully mature about till 25. So we shouldn't expect these full abstract cognitive abilities and reasoning from 12-year-olds. So kind of the main thing here, as opposed to the stages that Piaget was assuming, it's kind of more continuous instead. So stage-like patterns are probably less a thing. So in response to that, we have Lev Vygotsky, who I'm also probably mispronouncing this. But this scientist came out and he's like, okay, instead of Piaget's approach, who viewed cognitive development as universal across all individuals, across all cultures, I'm going to emphasize and stress the role of culture and differences in the development of a child. So the things that he emphasized were that you really learn a lot through these social and collaborative interactions. We talked about in the learning lecture, observational learning, right? So children very often will observe what their parents do or what their older siblings or their teachers do to figure out how to do things themselves. So for instance, they might they're not gonna just walk up to a bike and be like, oh, I know how to fix this. They're gonna collaborate with their parents. They're gonna watch what their parents do in order to kind of learn and figure things out. He also mentioned that language is key for cognitive development. And this is true because children tend to use language to initiate social contact. They need to be able to use language to communicate and collaborate with other people. And additionally, language kind of shapes how you develop cognitively. For example, something as simple as learning to count can be so influenced by culture. Language differences in how you name numbers, for instance, can either facilitate or temporarily act as a barrier to being able to learn that skill. One example is that in Korean, they kind of use the number 12 is represented by adding the words 10 and 2, whereas in English, 12 is its whole new word. So what your language allows you to say and communicate is going to kind of influence how you're able to manipulate and logic through different skills. In a similar vein, if a kid who speaks English is asked to give a researcher 23 blocks, they're likely to count out individually, here are 23 different blocks. Whereas a Korean child might make a little bit more systematic. They might make 2 rows of 10 and then 3 individual blocks. So depending on how you learn material, what words you have to describe material, you're gonna behave in a representative way. Now, following up on this idea that children learn through this collaborative social language interaction, Vygotsky came up with this idea of the zone of proximal development. So this is the range, this is this purple area right here, between what children can do unsupported, what they can do by themselves, and what they can do with social support. So if they're able to have a parent or a teacher or a friend kind of help and collaborate with them, what they can do. So there are still plenty of things they can't do, but this is the area of what they are capable of doing with help. So Vygotsky's kind of advice to parents is to provide children with these activities that are within reach. They're within the skill set, but neither too easy, what they can do by themselves, or too hard, what they can't do at all. Now, kind of consistent with this aspect, another kind of key skill that happens in childhood cognitive development is a skill called theory of mind. Maybe you've heard of this before, but it's kind of a really cool concept. Theory of mind is the understanding that other people have thoughts that are different than your own thoughts. So this is kind of similar to the mountain view task. Again, it emerges in that stage that Piaget called pre-operational, around 3 to 4. And it's critical to further social development in order to figure out that other people are thinking different things in order to interact socially with someone else. So for instance, in this example, this father is talking to his son on the phone, and the father asks, "What are you doing?" And the son responds, "Playing with this," because this child is too young to realize his dad can't see, doesn't have all the knowledge that he has of what toy he's holding. He assumes the dad can see all the things that the child can see. So this shows a lack of theory of mind. And we know from research on different patient populations that a failure to develop at all this theory of mind has often been linked to development of things like autism spectrum disorder, which we'll talk about later on in this class. But you may be wondering, how on earth do we tell if a child can understand that other people have thoughts that are different than theirs? And I want to introduce you to one of the classic tasks. It's called the false belief task. Super popular. And here's how it works. So there are variations, but in essence, you're presented with two people. So here's Sally. Sally has a basket. And this is Anne, and Anne has a box. Now, Sally has a red ball that she's going to put into her basket. So she puts her red ball into the basket. Then she leaves. So right now we've got the red ball in the basket and Anne J chilling next to her box. So while Sally is out of the room, Anne takes the ball out of the basket and puts it in her box. And then Sally comes back. She wants to play with her ball. Where is Sally going to look for her ball? So I want you to tell me, what is your answer? Where is Sally going to look for the ball? And then I want you to further tell me, how do you think a child who does not have theory of mind would answer this question? So let me know your thoughts.